I'm not as experienced in Monster Hunter games. My introduction to the series was with Monster Hunter World, and I quickly put it down because of the learning curve. Either I was too dumb to pick up the combat in that game, or the game was just not very beginner friendly. It wasn't until Monster Hunter Rise where I really started to build a appreciation and a love for the series. Monster Hunter Rise made the game more accessible to me. It was very fast paced in comparison to Monster Hunter World, and it just felt like a very well structured and fun combat cycle, and it made me come back to it again and again and again. I want to say I put at least 50 hours on Monster Hunter Rise. So when there was a new Monster Hunter game coming out for the PlayStation 5 for this current generation, I was a little bit skeptical because I understand that Monster Hunter Rise was a little bit more accessible, more beginner friendly in comparison to Monster Hunter World. So I kind of thought that because it was on the Switch was the main reason why Capcom made that game more accessible. So I was still a little bit iffy on whether I was going to like Monster Hunter Wilds, but I was completely surprised by how much I truly enjoyed that game. Monster Hunter Wilds is a continuation, obviously, of the Monster Hunter series, much to its counter benefit. And I say that for a few reasons, but I'll talk about that a little bit more. Overall, Monster Hunter Wilds is a great addition to the Monster Hunter series. You are, again, another Monster Hunter, and you kind of essentially are put into the story with the player kind of already understanding what Monster Hunter is, which I kind of appreciate in that sense. It doesn't really explain too much about what monsters are. And they just sort of introduce you to this new world, and they just put you into the world, and you literally start out the game by fighting monsters. I do appreciate that that's been a current trend in a lot of games, especially a lot of modern games, with the introduction of games like Breath of the Wild, where they literally just put you in the game and they let you figure things out. I kind of appreciated that for Monster Hunter Wilds, but I guess I should start there with the story. It's not as engaging as I would want to think that Monster Hunter Rise was. Monster Hunter Rise, at least you had a home base that you needed to protect. There was that storyline of monsters are going berserk, and you kind of have to like figure it out and try and save the people around in your camp. Monster Hunter Wilds, I guess you are trying to help this little boy that shows up from in the middle of nowhere, and you have to kind of like bring him back home, but it's been a little bit cliche. And I guess Monster Hunter Rise in a sense is also a little bit cliche. I wouldn't necessarily call that a negative on the game, because that's more me trying to look for things that aren't necessarily there. It's a Monster Hunter game. You hunt monsters. That's as much as there needs to be a story. And I guess I need to change my expectations in that sense. But some of the positives that I want to talk about this game is the fun battle cycle. Monster Hunter previously, it wasn't as open world. You would essentially go to these areas to go and hunt a specific monster, track this monster down, collect resources, etc., etc. And then you would fight the monster, beat the monster, and then you would get sent back to the home base. There was never that sort of exploration that you would see in, modern open world games. But you have it now in Monster Hunter Wilds, which I really, really do appreciate, because once you beat a monster outside of the main story, the main campaign, you can either travel back to camp automatically, or you can just hang around and keep exploring and hunt other monsters or whatever. Hunting monsters is no longer tied to it being a mission. They're just living things in the world that you can hunt or not hunt, or you can just ignore once you've passed them by. And it really kind of amps the gameplay cycle. It really makes it more engaging. It makes it more fun, but it still doesn't take away a lot from the monster hunting experience. And same again, multiplayer pretty much the same. You send out an SOS flare, people can join your match, but you can also opt out of the online multiplayer portion and just call for the help of AI monster hunters. which they're essentially, they're not very useful in a sense. They're really, really rudimentary in things that they do. They essentially just take away aggro from the monster towards them, so you can focus on attacking certain parts of the body, or trying to set up different attacks for the monster. And it really is helpful and useful in a way, but don't think that if you're running into issues with a monster, that asking for AI help is going to help you in any way. There's a bunch of different quality of life, obviously, stuff that was still, part of Monster Hunter Rise. Some of the auto crafting stuff is extremely useful, auto looting and all that sort of stuff. And especially, I like the hook. I like that you're able to collect things that are far away from you when you're on your bird, your secret, I really don't know how to say the name, your mount, essentially. And you can just collect things with the hook from far away. It's really nice to just be able to like shoot a little hook and then just get the materials that you're looking for. It kind of does push you through the game a lot quicker though, and through a hunt a lot quicker, which I guess a lot of people might not necessarily like that, but I do, because I really never really liked when games would make you have to get off your mount to collect a resource, collect a plant, collect some minerals and whatnot. It just really, it throws you off from, the pace of the game. So I really do appreciate that. There's also other quality of life improvements, like now you can set your mount to auto follow your marker, your essentially your mission, where you're supposed to be going, the monster that you're supposed to hunt. And in a way, that's really helpful, because every time, this is part of the gameplay mechanic of Monster Hunter, after the first stage of a fight with a monster, that monster is gonna try and walk away and escape and go to a different area. And that travel time from the first phase of the fight to the second phase of the fight, setting your mount to just follow automatically the monster, and you focusing on other things like forging your weapon, getting it, repairing your weapon, crafting potions, crafting traps and whatever in the menu system, really makes that gameplay loop and mechanic, I want to say gameplay loop, a lot more streamlined. Not necessarily easier, but it just, little quality of life things here and there that make the gameplay loop a lot more enjoyable and less of a hassle. I remember playing Monster Hunter Rise, and I would put off the main objective, the main monster that I was hunting, for so long to hunt other things, because I knew that once I hunted that specific monster, I was going to get sent back to the camp, and I would lose out on a lot of things. A lot of exploration wasn't being done. A lot of I would have to stop and think what I'm gonna craft, stop and think what I need in this area and whatnot, and it just sort of like put this unnecessary pressure every single hunt. Whereas in Monster Hunter Wilds, you don't have to worry about that anymore. So it's those little small quality of life updates that I really do like about this game. As I said, this is more of an open world kind of thing. It's not Breath of the Wild. It's not a huge map that you can just explore. It's little different areas connected through little passageways. There's also obviously fast travel and whatnot. What I essentially categorize as open world is the fact that you can beat a monster and not have to go back to your camp necessarily. So it's a little bit more streamlined. It's a little bit more fun to engage in the world and with the monsters, and I think it's a huge upgrade in the gameplay loop of Monster Hunter as far as we've known Monster Hunter games as. And again, another huge thing, this game is rather handholdy in comparison to Monster Hunter World. Specifically Monster Hunter Rise, there is a sort of learning curve to it, especially if you're a Nintendo player. You never had the opportunity to play Monster Hunter games. Monster Hunter Rise was a little bit more accessible in a way, but this game really does a good job at explaining mechanics, explaining weapons, explaining how to do different things, and it does rather put tutorials here and there, so you understand how to more effectively play the game, and I really do appreciate it. Of course, I can't speak to this fully because I did play a lot of Monster Hunter Rise, so I was familiar with the weapons. I was familiar with the armor crafting, the forging the weapons, upgrading the weapons and the armor, giving, forging and upgrading armor and weapons for your palico, all that sort of stuff. Mechanics that are essentially part of previous Monster Hunter games. So in a sense, I already knew what I had to do. It was just a matter of like, oh, this is a new world. I gotta get used to this. I gotta get used to the new quality of life updates. But in the grand scheme of things, it was a very easy thing to kind of pick up again after like 2 years of me not playing Monster Hunter. For a new player, it might be a little bit overwhelming, but it does a great job at explaining those type of things, and it's a little bit easier to pick up. So I think this is a great game to pick up if you're very new to the Monster Hunter world. But that's where I also go into one of my biggest criticisms of the game. Not much has changed in terms of weapons, upgrading your armor and that sort of stuff. Like, a lot of it is more of the same. Like the weapon choices from Monster Hunter Rise to Monster Hunter Wilds, they're essentially the same. Yes, a lot of the battle mechanics are a little bit different. Some of the actual weapons work a little bit differently. I kind of feel that Monster Hunter Wilds battle movements are a little bit slower than Monster Hunter Rise. It's definitely a slower paced game in comparison to Monster Hunter Rise, definitely. But I'm a big fan of trying new things. I love when game series that, they've been following the same formula. Legend of Zelda. I know I talk so much about Legend of Zelda, but it is my favorite game series of all time. When they released Breath of the Wild, or even when they released Wind Waker, like there were a lot of things that they tried that either they stuck the landing or they didn't. But still, I really did appreciate that they tried new things and different. They try to change the gameplay loop. They try to change the items that you use, the equipment that you use. And I kind of wanted to see more new weapons being used in Monster Hunter Wilds. It is essentially the same weapons that you can use in Monster Hunter Rise. I know it's the tradition, it's the formula, it's worked. People kind of really build their characters and they build their experiences with Monster Hunter based on the weapon that they've known for so long. And I do appreciate that there's a large variety of weapons, but them being the same as, previous games, I don't know. It kind of felt like, oh, this is just a continuation. This is just more Monster Hunter. This is like, it's not, the changes in the weapon selection are null, and it kind of just feels like, oh, it's just a continuation. It's more of the same. And in a way, if it works well, it's a welcome thing. One of my favorite games of all time is Majora's Mask. There's almost no changes in terms of weapons, in terms of abilities and that sort of thing, in terms of movement from Ocarina of Time. But I still really like that game because of the story, because of the environments. So I understand that works for a lot of people. For me, I don't know. I kind of want... One thing I did like about Monster Hunter Rise is the ability to use the bugs. I forget the actual name of them. The bugs that you would use to use your abilities with, use your weapons with, that they would pull you. You would use them kind of like a slingshot, where they would pull you towards an enemy, and then you would spin around, for example, with the longsword, and that was an attack in a sense. And again, it was also used, those bugs, as a method of dodging the monsters or dodging an attack. Like, it was such a small addition to the gameplay loop of Monster Hunter, but it made the gameplay way more varied. And in this, you don't have that, and it feels, you have it in a sense, but you don't have that ability with you all the time. You have to find certain areas where you can hook to and stuff like that, but it's very limited in a way. And I guess it was a little bit overpowered using those bugs, but still, it made the gameplay loop a lot more different and a lot more fun. It gave you a bigger arsenal on how to attack these monsters, I would say. And again, boring story. It's just kind of cliche. But again, you don't necessarily play Monster Hunter for the story. Not at all. You just read the title of the game. That's what you're going to be doing for 50 hours nonstop, just hunting monsters. The story doesn't really matter. I've heard, reviews, and I've heard people say that once you beat the story, not much changes. So it's more of the same. people know what they're getting with Monster Hunter, and I guess I really do respect that. I respect Capcom for being like, yo, we know what Monster Hunter is. We're not gonna try and like something different and change a lot of it, but simple additions here and there I think would have done wonders for the game. But either way, overall, I really do like Monster Hunter Wilds. It's definitely become an obsession to me. It's an amazing game to play. I play on my PlayStation, and I play on the PlayStation Portal, and it's a great type of game to just pick up on the PlayStation Portal before going to bed or something, and then just hunting one or two monsters, and then that's it. It's a great type of game to pick up and play for a few hours, put it down, and then do other things. Like it's the gameplay mechanic kind of lends itself to that. And again, a lot of the things that the monsters drop, the gameplay loop is very rewarding in a sense, because there's always going to be loot. The game rewards you for playing it, and that's something that I really do appreciate. It kind of taps into that, I don't know, human nature of wanting to collect everything. And it's such a well thought out but very simple gameplay loop and gameplay design that is just, there's just no surprise why Monster Hunter is loved by many people. Overall, it's a great game. Should you get it? Yes, I think you should get it, especially if you're not very convinced, if you're not very familiar with Monster Hunter. I would say play Monster Hunter Rise first before this one, because it'll be a lot easier to pick up Monster Hunter Wilds. But I will say that Monster Hunter Wilds is a little bit slower in pace and battle mechanics than Monster Hunter Rise, so there might be that difference. But yes, it is easy enough to pick up that I think this is a great first game to get into the Monster Hunter series. But folks, you let me know down in the comments below what you think of Monster Hunter Wilds. Have you played it? What do you think are some of the things they could work on, some of the things they could update or patch in later down the line? I'm not entirely too sure. I'm sure there's going to be DLC. I mean, we had it with Monster Hunter Wilds, and I'm sure it's going to be way more complicated and way more challenging, much like Monster Hunter Worlds was with Iceborne. I forget the name of the DLC because I didn't play it because I was terrible at that game, but I'm sure that's coming for Monster Hunter Wilds. Let me know down in the comments below. But folks, I've been True Fernie. Please, if you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs down, because believe it or not, every single bit helps. Links to my socials down below. Please make sure to follow me on Blue Sky, where I spend most of my waking hours. Talk about anime, gaming, cycling, anything and everything that might interest you as my viewer, and where I spend most of my waking hours. But folks, please take care of one another, but most importantly, take care of yourself. Don't forget, repair your weapons. You might forget, and you're probably gonna be fighting a monster, a very difficult monster, with a blunt ass weapon, and you don't want that. It's gonna make the game more difficult. Peace.